How traumatized are you from our 3 to 5 month investigation?
Yeah, it has certainly changed my perspective, not only on this relatively small system that I took part in for 20
Mhm.
years, but the system as a whole. Like,
Yeah.
so that's, to me, that's the traumatic part. I was on the receiving end of bad activity and had to go through the appeals and set things straight
Yeah.
regularly in my practice within this court. And I will say that that part, what these individual judges do in individual cases that we see, it was much more traumatic when I was practicing than it is now. Now, I was only dealing with mine. I didn't know how widespread it was,
Right.
but it was much more personal. And, you work for clients, you get to know them, you
Yeah.
know everything about their families, and you go in. It certainly isn't the same for the attorney when the client is wronged, but
Right, for sure.
it's still something that just sticks with you, and you just, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
the amount of sleep you lose and how angry you get.
It
We're
affects you.
competitive people. I mean,
Totally.
we're attorney. You didn't become an attorney because you don't like to win.
Right, exactly. I
You
always say
like to
we're
help people.
a particular kind of person.
Yeah,
Also, it's just different in my opinion, like seeing this. Like I've seen like a total like evolution of you in a way over this past 4 or 5 months that I saw in myself when it was happening in real
sure.
time. Because I've said this 1,000 times, it's boring at this point, but I thought we had a Louisville family court problem. And then it turns out we've got a family court problem nationwide,
Yeah.
probably globally.
And I argued against that
Yeah.
when we first started talking, was that you came in just talking about the whole
Hmm.
system being broken, and I was defensive of that because I think, and I still believe, that as an entity, if the courts are going to have to deal with soft issues relating kids and things like that,
Yeah.
then a specific type of court that still acts as a court and where there are still rules and rules are followed is a better place than a court of just general jurisdiction that handles everything on a regular basis. And I don't know, I still believe in the concept, but the way that it is practiced, where it's so discretionary. In every jurisdiction that we've studied, the judges have so much discretion in the way they run the court and the lack of
Hmm.
transparency, that someone has taken what I believe to be a good idea and created a real monster that is just regularly and wholesale violating people's constitutional rights every single day.
And destroying families, destroying children's
Yeah.
future. We're going to have a generation of children with PTSD or CPTSD. Hypothetically, I'm not, I can't diagnose that, but this is going to be traumatic on the back end.
Yeah.
And lawyers, I could say this 1,000 times, lawyers are not. In what world did we decide a bunch of lawyers are the ones that should decide how a family looks or operates?
Yeah, I agree. And especially people that work within family court and do primarily custody and divorce
Yeah.
cases or dependency, neglect, and abuse. So
Right.
what do we handle? The families that don't work, that are dysfunctional
Yeah.
in one way or another, cases where one party may be hurting the kid. We see the worst of the worst.
Right.
It would be like,
Well,
uh,
the other thing is like, there has never been or there rarely is a serial killer that isn't well liked amongst the community. You know what I mean? When you're talking about people that are arrested for possession of child, images or arrested for SA, they're coaches, they're priests, you know what I'm saying? They're all those things. And so bad people, abusive people present as sometimes the most likable person that you'll ever meet, right?
yeah,
So what I mean by that is attorneys clearly don't have the ability to understand that because being cool, calm, and collective and likable and prestigious in family court wins you the children.
well, it can. It certainly can. It sure as hell doesn't hurt, and
Right.
it's a lot. It gets you a long way there. If I'm sitting there and I have a close case in a lot of circumstances, and this stinks to say, but I mean, you tell me I've got, like, on paper the good facts, or I've got the much more likable person who I can present in a certain way, I'm going to take that every time. If I'm betting on which side is the winner in that, and it stinks. But if the family court system didn't exist, the same exact problems would exist with that with juries. You're talking about likable and winning someone over. If you have a short period of time to charm a jury
Oh, I
and
don't.
they determine everything, I think it's much harder to keep that up over the course of a family court action where the same players are seeing this person over and over and over.
I disagree because I think that you're going to have 12 members or, 6 members. But what happens if you're in an abusive situation is that, especially over years and years and years, you're going to look, appear, and act crazy. You're going to say those kind of things. You're going to be a little bit more theatrical. You're going to defend yourself. But the odds statistically of a jury member having experienced that or understanding just common sense life, not lawyers in the East End, sipping Chardonnay and getting online and, tweeting, I'm a social justice warrior. They don't have the same perspective as people that work for a living.
We're recording this right now.
What?
I said, don't tell them we're recording this right now.
And why you?
Yeah, but I think that's a different thing. I mean, I agree from the point of view if you have people that might understand more. I mean, it's a whole jury of your peers, right? People that are more like you, making those decisions. But when you were just talking about the way people present, if you have to charm a jury one time at one trial, it's going to be a lot easier than charming the same judge over the course of like a year and a half that is going to see a lot more sides of you. I mean, I would think.
Well, but why is it that it doesn't work in criminal?
What do you mean?
I mean, why do sociopaths that get convicted in criminal court if they're so good at presenting their case?
Well, they don't always. There are a lot of people that don't.
No, and I get what you're saying, but also too, like you could have, if you took out on top of taking out, the family court, just hearing family court cases and not being trained on psychopathy or, sociopathic behaviors, abusive behaviors, coercive control behaviors. But if you took out the court appointed experts with immunity, like when you're talking about battered wife syndrome. So you could have experts that testify, evaluate people. But if you take away that component of immunity, that leads to liability. So only legitimate people are going to be doing that.
Maybe. I mean, how many famous cases are there where there's video of someone committing exactly what they're on trial for and they're acquitted because of factors that are something other than the fact that there's the video of exactly what you're doing, but either you came across in the way that we like. I mean, shit.
Well, so even for example of that, though, like if you're talking about, when you see a situation where somebody's recording somebody in an intimate situation that is like allegedly a domestic violence or any of that kind of stuff, and they lose the kids and it's the victim has been pushed to a point that's like, you know what I mean? And then they snap. And so the perpetrator starts recording them. I think a jury would look at that very differently. On top of that, if these recordings happen all the time in family court with no criminal charges. So if that recording shows a criminal action, why is it not being prosecuted, is what I'm saying. I think domestic violence should be prosecuted by a prosecutor, not determined by a family court judge that hasn't read the motion, that doesn't have training. With no oversight.
I don't disagree with you, but I can't tell you how many times during the course of my career when I'm representing people who are victims of horrible domestic violence and we have a family court action going on because they might be going through a divorce or a custody battle, which oftentimes leads to, the abuse, the abuse is usually always there, but it leads to some overt action that is just really bad.
Yeah.
And how few times I could get a prosecutor to do a damn thing about it.
Because of family court. If family court didn't exist, they would have no option because that would be the only place the complaint would be filed.
Yeah, that's true.
So the creation of family court allowed, you know who would jump into oncoming traffic if family court went away? Every single district and circuit judge. Because they're like, I ain't got time for that shit.
I agree. I mean, and they handle a pretty diverse, especially over in circuit court. I mean, they're handling things from capital murder type cases all the way down to contract disputes. But those things still, from a point of view of if I'm sitting there having to decide them,
right.
It's easier to handle those things than to come in and handle the kids stuff. And I agree. And you hear that from the judges who still are the judges on family court cases where they don't have a family court. So you go out in the counties and you have these judges that handle family court and the rest of the circuit docket. Some have commissioners who can, preside over hearings and report to the judge. Some of them don't. Some of them you just have circuit
Yeah.
court judges that are presiding over family court issues. You hear those kinds of things. But in those cases, you don't have juries.
And then it's also like we're talking about accountability, but just to go back, and obviously we're just like problem solving, and like it's like constantly on a loop for me, just because, over these last 2 years, and then especially the last 5 months when we opened Judgy, to get all of the emails and on our social media, getting them all, it's the same story. I mean, essentially, it's literally like same play, different actors happening everywhere. It is a significant amount of trauma for me personally to just handle as a lawyer. I want to fix the system, and it just seems like almost so hopeless sometimes.
I feel that the solutions would be fairly easy, and what's hopeless isn't that it is really complex problem that there's not going to be the willpower to do it, and there are enough vested interests in not changing it that it's not going to change. And that's the part that feels hopeless to me.
Yeah.
I think so if in fact a fatal flaw, and I'm just taking your argument, I'm not saying I'd agree or disagree, because there's plenty of domestic violence I think should only be handled, on the criminal side and be prosecuted. I've had people that were caught admitting to some of the most horrible things, and I couldn't get prosecutors to do very much at all in them because, there's a family court case. That's very different, and then the results are different, and the power of the judge in the family court is so different than what the prosecutors could do in criminal court. But let's say that is one of the major flaws that can be carved out and changed, and you don't have to throw out the entire family court system.
Don't throw out the baby with the bathwater.
Yeah, that's.
I'm ready. Bye, baby.
I think
abolish family court.
I think one of the advantages that you have with jury trials is finality, and you have decisions made. And I think that the biggest issue that I had in cases, and I know it leads to so much of the bad perception of family court, is how long things drag on and how expensive it gets. And so much of the frustration that I had as a practitioner, and I'm sure it's the same way for people that are going through the system, is there's just no reason for it to take as long as it does. And the judges don't want to make decisions, and they want to hire out or appoint other people to do the work for them. And then when they get it, they want to put in half measures that just cause things to be dragged out, the trauma to get worse. Whereas if you had, structure and finality, it's never going to be perfect. A court of law should not be raising kids or determining how kids should be raised, but it's a place of last resort. But the worst thing that families that are going through this, and most people that are coming to court, aren't able to resolve things themselves, or they wouldn't be in court. And it could be from one person causing it, or both parties are just...
Totally.
But you still have to have someone make a decision. The last thing that they need is something that's just not going to end.
Yeah.
That's not going to be final, and things are just going to be dragged on and just have a temporary label. And you're just wondering, is this going to continue until my kids are 18? Am I going to have to continue to still be monitored in all these things, and to keep paying this army of people that are in my privacy or aren't returning my phone calls for the next 5 years? If we had a system where here are the rules, everyone's going to follow the rules, and we're going to get some finality, I still think there is a role for a court system that is focused on these specific complex issues that do take a little bit more time and expertise than some other things that we encounter in the law.
No, and that's fair enough. I think it's a good conversation to have. I am just, at this point over it, but I do think getting rid of FOCs, GALs, at an absolute minimum, I think that we can agree as a society and between us that lawyers don't have any business telling anybody else how to raise their kids.
No, I agree. But when I worked as a GAL, I took that job very seriously, and I treated it as I'm here to protect, under these statutes, the best interests of my client, and to make sure that things were done right. And I was pretty brutal to everyone when I needed to be, but I stayed in that role as legal counsel for that client, and I stayed away from, I'm going going to be a parenting coordinator at the same time.
Yeah, yeah,
Also,
yeah.
let's facilitate
Yeah, yeah,
the
yeah.
communications. Also, oh yeah, go ahead and send the tuition money to me and I will pay it to the daycare. Like
Yeah.
we see them, we see that
Micromanaging people's lives.
well, but the courts put them in a position to where it's this ambiguous role where anything child related now you're in charge of, and that doesn't make any sense. It's
No, it doesn't.
outside of what the law says and what the rules say. Same thing with FOCs and same thing with judges.
Well, even in what
So,
common sense would say.
yeah, I don't necessarily think it's a problem with our statutes and the way that it's set up. I think it's the way that it's evolved and that it's practiced. And I've seen that change over the course of my career.
Yeah, I mean, you're 5 months in, I'm 2 years in. I think you're at like stage 2 point, 2A of where I
Well,
got. But I think immediately, I think especially in nothing else, like Louisville FOCs need to go, or at a minimum, there needs to be oversight as far as like file your bills monthly. I mean, I think, you know, I don't know why that would be unreasonable. GALs, your bills need to be submitted monthly. I mean, as a
well,
practitioner, that's what you would
they
do.
should do what the rule says. You're appointed to investigate X, file a report on X, and then if there's a hearing, you get to testify under oath as a witness and you get to be cross-examined and all of that. And that's your role. That's the way that that's supposed to be. I think that could still work. I don't know. I'm a little on the fence about that, even if it's practiced the right way. But that's just not how it's used. They're
Yeah.
used as, oh gosh, that's a tough decision. I'm going to appoint an FOC so I don't have to make that decision myself as a judge.
Which is boom,
Why?
canning them out like candy, making
Yeah,
their buddies
here,
rich. Yeah.
you do the work and come up with this, and I'll follow your, because it protects me. I can follow what you're telling me, and I probably am not going to get overturned. So it's just they become mini judges. They are granted some level of immunity for doing it, and it tends to solve less problems than it creates.
Yep. And I think
Yeah.
the modern family court system, I mean, really anywhere throughout the country, you're talking about the 90s, 2000s, when you talk about all of these third party appointments, custodial evaluators, probably like depending on the jurisdiction, maybe 2010 ish. So we're really in the next, I would say, 5 to 10 years going to see the result as far as how it affected the children. And I cannot wait to have conversations with people that are over the age of 18 about their thoughts of GALs, custodial evaluators, and how their parents' divorce affected them.
I've actually been to CLEs earlier in my career that were in some of that appeared before some of the earliest versions of family court, and they had become lawyers. Oh man, I've heard from people that became lawyers and judges to try to fix the problems because they were so traumatized by the system. But I'm not for 1 second going to think that appearing through, as a normal witness in a jury trial type experience would not be equally or more traumatic. It would just be over faster, and you wouldn't be dragged through years of this kind of stuff and subject to some of the insanity that we see from some of these orders that are getting overturned on an emergency basis that we're seeing out of family court.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Now, when you first told me, you thought we should get rid of it, and I really didn't realize, and of course, the problems that we have in other places, how widespread the same things that we have going on here are, but how little transparency there is. And one of the bigger issues that I see with family court in general, and this is not something in Kentucky as much because we have open courts, we have recordings of our courts. Because it's family court and they're sensitive matters, it seems to give the courts and the legislators in other states just a reason to just shut the courts away from the public to where you don't see what happens. People can't see any of the proceedings, including the people that are involved in the proceedings. So even if your rationale was, oh, we don't want other people getting into other people's business, we're trying to protect them. What is the rationale for someone in a California court having a hearing and not being able to get a video of it themselves?
Exactly. Or not being able to get transcripts
Yeah.
unless they pay for someone to be there to do the transcripts. Or if the court is providing that, they have to pay $15,000, $2,000, $4,000 for transcripts of their court hearing.
And I mean, we have videos of all of our hearings,
Yeah.
unless the
Something
cases are
happens.
sealed. Well, or someone throws away a motion, or as someone seals a case just because they're doing a favor for someone. But for the most part, everyone knows they're on camera when they're sitting on the bench. Everyone knows they're on the camera when they're performing their part in the family court role in court. And we still see so many times where, oh, I didn't bother to read the opinion overturning me, so I'm going to pretend it didn't exist. Or
The file's not even in front of me,
oh
sir.
yeah, or judges asking the attorneys, oh, the statute requires me to do this, right? Or is it that? And thinking out loud. You still see that when they're on video. Imagine how things can run amok when they know that not only is no one watching, but no one can see what happens, even if they request it. There's not going to be any record of it. That part is terrifying to me.
Absolutely. I mean, that is well past the beginning of the end, as far as I'm concerned. Like, that's the hardest part sometimes for me jumping in on this. It's like, what did I take on? But it seems like the progression of violation of constitutional protection is literally not at stage one.
Yeah, well, what do I know about it? I can't look at a video to see how they do things there. I just
LOL.
get to hear from the victims of it, and the fact that when we go to look into it, you try to request a video of something like, yeah, that doesn't exist.
I mean, and that's another thing. Like, how can it ever be corroborated? But anyway, we appreciate y'all. We are going to have this app out soon. I know we're going to start in Kentucky. It is coming, but California in particular, you do have my heart after being out in the OC. And we want to continue to hear all your stories. And 2026 is going to be a hell of a year for everybody, I think, when it comes to judicial accountability, right?
Yep. Keep pushing.
Judge-y.com. Thank you.
Peace.
We need some justice. When I describe justice.
Content of this podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only. It is not intended to be and should not be construed as legal advice. Engaging with this content does not create an attorney-client relationship between you and the hosts, guests, or their firms. The views and opinions expressed on this podcast are solely those of the individuals involved and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of any law firm, company, or organization. We make no representations or warranties regarding the accuracy, completeness, or applicability of the information presented. Any reliance on the information in this podcast is at your own risk. Laws are constantly changing, and every situation is unique. You should always seek the advice of a qualified attorney for your specific legal concerns.